falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling, I'm falling. Shouldn't be trusting me, I could be making it all up, you know. Out of control, you don't know me. I'm a danger to myself.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically Me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. So how are you guys doing? I hope you guys have been having a great week. We are finally going to wrap up Why Meadow Died, Nikolas Cruz, and I do want to put a trigger warning out for this part specifically. We are going to talk about the day of. We're going to talk about everything that happened that day. I am going to list off the victims in order as everything happened. This one is going to be much more triggering than any of the other parts, in my opinion. We all know what happened, and the reason that you're here and you clicked on this video is because you want to know the truth. And while we all know the role that Nikolas Cruz played in all of this, a lot of people don't know what was going on at the school during that time, things that had happened that could have prevented this whole thing right up until the very moment that he opened fire. And I think it's very important that we talk about that. This is a death penalty case, and because of that, his life is on the line. And while many people, no matter what I tell you, you're going to feel that he deserves the death penalty, and that is the way you feel, right? That's your opinion, and I can't change that, and I wouldn't want to. That's your opinion. It's valuable to you, and you came to that conclusion knowing all of the facts. And so that's the reason that I put all of this out. I feel like all of the facts need to be put out in order to make a decision about somebody's life. So whichever way you go, that is entirely yours. Okay, I'm not trying to take anything from anyone. Whatever you decide, it should be based off of everything. My purpose, I'm not making any excuses for him. Nothing excuse what he did. It can't. At the end of the day, people are wronged all the time. People are treated poorly all the time. People grow up in bad environments all the time. People are born with mental illness. It is what it is. That doesn't mean everybody has the right to go and do crazy things and take other people's lives or hurt other people. So I definitely don't want anyone to think that these videos are an excuse. I think that we can feel both ways. We can understand what happened here with Nikolas Cruz, but we can also say, even though people were at fault, it still doesn't take away from what he did. While I believe that this could have been prevented, it will never be right. What happened happened. There is no undoing. For everyone who is new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I hope that you find it educational and understand what I'm kind of leaning towards here and just bringing the truth about this case out in the open. Everybody knows what happened on this day at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. It was Valentine's Day, 2018. Everybody knows what Nikolas Cruz did. We are going to call him by his inmate number, which is 18-19-58. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to go into everything that he did to earn that inmate number. And because of that, I'm not glorifying what he did. I needed to use his name because he is a human being, and that is his name, and those were all the things that happened to him. This, however, this doesn't deserve any glorification, and unfortunately, people like this want their names out there, and other kids that are struggling or people that are struggling, for some reason, seem to see these names as someone they want to be. And it's sick and it's twisted, but it is what it is. So when we're talking about this, I will call him 1958, okay? I'm going to walk you step by step through what happened the second that 1958 stepped out of his Uber and walked onto MSD's campus. February 14th, 2018 at 2:19 p.m., MSD's SRO, which is the resource officer, Andrew Medina, was riding around the perimeter of the school on his golf cart, unlocking gates. Now, according to district policy, the gates were supposed to remain locked until 2:30 p.m., but just as locking bathrooms went against district policy, prior to the shooting, an assistant principal had ordered campus security to start opening the gates earlier to expedite the process of getting the ESE students onto buses. At the exact same time, while Medina was riding around, 1958 was pulling up in an Uber. Andrew Medina spotted 1958 as soon as he stepped out of this Uber, which was about a 2-minute walk away from Building 12. Now, the 1200 building was also known as the freshman building, but there were some other classes that juniors and seniors could take as well. Medina saw that 1958 was carrying what even appeared to him as a rifle bag. He said a duffel bag, a rifle bag. He described it as a couple of different things. And he also described 1958 as beelining to Building 12 with his head down, on a mission, walking with purpose. According to Andrew Medina and what he told police after the shooting, he began riding toward 1958, who looked back at Medina and made eye contact with him. It was at that moment that Andrew Medina thought to himself, "That's crazy, boy." He told police after the shooting, "I'm telling you, I knew who that kid was. We had a meeting about him last year, and we all agreed if there's going to be anybody who will come to this school and shoot up this school, it's going to be that kid."
And I knew the kid. I knew the kid from the school from last year. We had problems with Nikolas Cruz. I knew the kid. I knew him. I saw him.
When did you realize that you knew him?
When he walked on, like right when he walked on, and I saw him with the hat down, and I came to the golf cart, and he was walking beeline, and I got to like right here. And he gave me the look, like he looked back at me to see, where I was there. And once he looked, I was like, I knew it. As soon as I saw him, I said, "That's Nick." I didn't know his name at the time. Okay. But I'm texting all the security guys. Who's the kid who used to wear camo mask, who used to wear the camo, who used to do this, who used to be crazy, I'm trying to text all the guys to get his name so I can give it to the BSOs. Then one of my guys said Nick. Then I went to the AP and I said, "You remember Nick? Who's that?" He said, "Nick Cruz." Boom. And once he said it, I knew it. I'm telling you, I knew who the kid was because we had a meeting about him last year, and we said if there's going to be anybody who's going to come to this school and shoot the school up, it's going to be that kid. Because he had problems with everybody.
1958 began running as Medina approached closer. Medina became close enough to intercept 1958. However, he told police, "Something told me don't approach him," Like, I don't know if he had a handgun. He could have had a handgun in his pocket. This was the moment, the final moment that 1958 could have been stopped. But that didn't happen. Andrew Medina saw who it was. He knew he was expelled. He knew he was dangerous. He recognized the large bag to be a rifle bag. He was afraid to even approach him because he thought he may be in possession of a firearm.
To be honest, something inside me told me not to approach him. Something told me don't go running over there and chase him.
No hero.
Yeah. Something inside me just say report, like do what we've been taught. Report it. Because I was ready to go get him, like I was ready to go be the guy and just go get him. But then something right when I was pulling up in the golf cart, and then he looked back, something was like, "Just let him go and report and make sure your boy inside is good." So that's when I got on the radio and said, "Hey, suspicious guy."
Andrew Medina could have called a code red. If he had, someone in the office would have relayed that call over the intercom, and students in Building 12 would have taken cover in areas of their classroom that were not visible from the hallway. So why no code red call? According to a security consultant, Principal Ty Thompson had made it clear that he was the only one who was allowed to call a code red. And unfortunately, that day, Thompson was off campus traveling to Paris with his girlfriend. Instead of calling a code red, Andrew Medina radioed fellow campus security monitor and baseball coach David Taylor to tell him that a suspicious intruder with a duffel bag was heading into his building from the east side. Now, we talked about Andrew Medina and David Taylor in other videos. I have no idea why he described 1958 as a suspicious intruder, especially to David Taylor, because I told you guys in was my last video or the video before, it's been a few videos actually where I brought this up, that Andrew Medina and David Taylor specifically together joked about 1958 becoming a school shooter, and 1958 legit just walked on to the school campus carrying a fucking rifle bag. It said Cabela's on the side, and it okay. When he was attending MSD, he wasn't even allowed to carry a backpack. Do you remember that? We talked about that. Towards the end of him being a student at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, he was not allowed to carry a backpack for fear that he may bring a weapon to school. Now here he is with a duffel bag, rifle bag, whatever you want to call it, expelled, walking onto the campus, beelining with a purpose. David Taylor was posted up on the west side of the second floor, monitoring the only unlocked bathroom in the building. Now, this is the second time I'm bringing up locked bathrooms, so let me explain very quickly. Assistant Principal Porter had decided to lock most of the high school bathrooms and patrol the remaining bathrooms in order to deter vaping and drug use that had been going on in the bathrooms. Unfortunately, because of many of the bathrooms were locked, this became unfortunate. Taylor ran down the west stairwell, and as he walked across the first floor, he saw 1958 coming out of the east stairwell. 1958 saw him and retreated back into the east stairwell. Again, another time that he possibly could have been stopped. Had Andrew Medina come this way, and David Taylor come this way, and they just tackle his ass. Andrew Medina could have called a code red. He didn't. David Taylor it's just, I'm not going to go into it because it's too frustrating. Let's just stick to the facts of the day. Taylor figured that 1958 was heading up the east stairwell, so he ran back to the west stairwell to see if he could spot him on the second floor. But 1958 did not go upstairs. He took out his AR-15 and he began loading the magazine. So at this point, he wasn't even loaded yet. He wasn't even ready. And as he was doing this, freshman Chris McKenna, who was one of the first witnesses to testify, came across 1958. And Chris was told, "Get out of here, man. Things are about to get bad." David Taylor heard the shots as he was heading up the stairwell. He did not call a code red. He jumped into a closet and he hid. Those shots that David Taylor heard took the lives of the first 6 students. Martin Anguiano, 14, Luke Hoyer, 15, Gina Montalto, 14, Alyssa Alhadef, 14, Elena Petty, 14, and Alex Schachter, 14. Andrew Medina heard the shots from outside the building. He recalled, "I heard the first bang, like pow," and I'm like, oh. Then I heard 3 sets of 5 shots. It was loud. You kind of felt the percussion coming out of the building, the echo coming out of that building, and it was loud.
And you said once he made it into the building, not even a minute later, you still hear the
I'm telling you, wasn't even a minute later when he got in that building, I heard the first bang, bam.
How many bangs do you think you heard?
I heard 15 bangs. After the first bang, I heard at least 15 bangs after that. Bah, 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 bah. And then bah, 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 bah. And then it was like 3 sessions of like five shots over, and it was loud. Like you could kind of feel the percussion coming out of that building, the echo coming out of the doors of the building. It was loud. It was kind of surreal to really hear, because to hear that noise, it ain't a firecracker noise. It wasn't like somebody banging. It was something different, and that's when I was like, this.
It was kind of surreal, because to hear that noise, it ain't a firecracker noise. It wasn't like someone banging. It was something different. I get on my radio and I go, suspicious noises coming out of the 1200 building, because I don't know yet. I'm not gonna say gunshots. You never know, man. It could be, you know. That's crazy, you know? So I'm like, suspicious noises coming out of the 1200 building. We got a suspicious guy in there. I cannot express how upset this makes me. I can't even imagine the parents of the students and how they feel knowing this. Andrew Medina knew this suspicious guy. He knew it was the same guy that he earlier identified to be, and I will say his name here, Nikolas Cruz. When their eyes met, he knew who it was. This suspicious guy was also the same guy that Medina was too afraid to approach minutes earlier for fear that he had a firearm. Later, in his conversation with police, Andrew Medina gave them the following explanation for why he didn't call a code red. This is alarming, because it shows the types of policies and protocols that were going on. I wasn't gonna call code red or black because I didn't actually visualize a gun. We've been doing this training at school. You know, don't yell it unless you get a good visual, because you go code black and they shut the whole, you get the cops out there for nothing. And I don't want to be the guy who calls that, you know? I mean, I guess he'd rather be the guy who watches a kid who he himself is afraid of. These were his own words. Had a gun was known and joked about by Medina to be a school shooter. Watching him walk into a school that he was no longer a student at with a rifle bag, and Medina hears these loud banging and popping sounds that, in his own words, he knew weren't firecrackers or banging or anything else like that. And he doesn't call a code red still. He doesn't go into the building. He does nothing. I guess that's the guy he wanted to be. I'm really trying to have compassion for Andrew Medina, because there's no doubt in my mind that he lives and relives every single moment of that day, every day. But I cannot give him the benefit of the doubt here while I'm trying to tell the truth about what happened. Andrew Medina then turns around and he heads in his golf cart to the only armed man on campus, Deputy Scott Peterson. Meanwhile, students in rooms 1214 and 1216 know exactly what's happening, but they have no idea what to do. They were desperately trying to find cover while watching their classmates get shot and killed right next to them. The next 2 students killed were Nicholas Dworet, 17, and Helena Ramsey, 17. Andrew Medina picked Deputy Peterson up. Someone radioed, "It sounds like fireworks." Campus security monitor Aaron Feiss radioed back, responding, "That's not fucking fireworks." I already mentioned that Principal Ty Thompson was away in Paris, and that left Assistant Principal Winfred Porter responsible for security. But he didn't hear any of this. He had no clue what was going on. Yes, the person in charge had no clue that Building 12 was under attack by a former troubled student. The first thing Porter did hear, more than 1 full minute after 18-19-58 fired his first shot, was the fire alarm going off. Many people have assumed that 18-19-58 pulled the fire alarm, but he did not. Reports after the shooting said that it was from the smoke from his rifle because the fire alarms were known to be very sensitive. During the trial, it was said it was from all the dust from the ceiling that fell down after bullets ricocheting off the ceiling panels. But either way, MSD's fire alarms had been years overdue for replacement. Assistant Principal Porter looked at the fire alarm panel, which suggested a gas leak in Building 12. Appropriate response for a gas leak would have been to call a code brown for Building 12, and this would have told students and teachers in Building 12 to evacuate. Meanwhile, it would tell all students and teachers in other buildings to shelter in place. However, Porter called for all buildings to evacuate. A teacher by the name Kim Krosick knew it was gunshots, and despite the assistant principal's order to evacuate, she ordered her students to hide where they could not be spotted and to stay quiet. Outside the building, MSD's athletic director, Chris Hickson, knew they were gunshots as well, and he ran toward Building 12. He entered through the west entrance and saw the shooter and charged him, hoping to tackle him. He barely made it 10 yards before getting shot. 1958 then approached room 1213, where he shot victim 9, Carmen Shentrup, 16. 8 seconds after Carmen was shot, Deputy Scott Peterson arrived in Medina's golf cart on the east side of Building 12. Hearing the shots, Peterson told Medina there was an active shooter and to get out of here. Medina took off, Peterson drew his gun, and he stood there. He just stood there. And as he stood there, 1958 walked down the first floor hallway, came across Chris Hickson, who he had just wounded, and fired more rounds into him, taking his life. Chris Hickson, 49. And Peterson just stood there. Moments before Chris Hickson was shot, the second time, Coach Aaron Feiss arrived at the west side of Building 12. He had already spoken to Chris McKenna, so he had no doubt what was happening inside. Feiss ran in, entering the west stairwell at the exact time as 1958. According to Aaron's brother Ray, there were burns on Aaron's hands, which indicated that he had gotten a hold of the rifle just before he was fatally shot. Aaron Feiss, 37. He fell in the doorway. His body was visible from outside the building. Deputy Peterson retreated and took cover behind a neighboring building and radioed possible shots fired in the 1200 building. All second floor teachers recognized the sound as gunshots before the fire alarm went off, and so they in turn hid their students. But unfortunately, several teachers on the third floor did not. If a code red had been called, they would have directed their students to shelter. Instead, they began following protocol for the sounding alarm. Teachers that testified had said that they knew something was wrong when that alarm went off because they had actually had a fire drill earlier on in the day already, interestingly enough. And another thing they had noted was that they never did drills later in the afternoon that close to school dismissal. It would make no sense. Like by the time they would, get everyone out and get everyone, like the bell would have already rung. So they knew something wasn't right. The second floor appeared to be completely empty, as 1958 even said aloud, "Where are all the kids?" And he said a lot of stuff during this. He was singing, he was saying stuff like, come out, wherever you are," and things like that. He had completely lost his mind. Just above him, on the third floor, the hallways were filling with well over 100 students who had no idea what was happening at all yet. Peterson, still hiding behind the neighboring building, began radioing for units to be dispatched. He radioed that they did not have a description of the shooter, but in fact, they did. Medina did. right? And Medina had given Peterson that ride in his golf cart to his hiding spot. Did they not communicate? Did he not say, dude, this is so-and-so who was expelled last year? Students inside the second floor classrooms had already been calling 911 and family members. Peterson also radioed, there appear to be shots fired. I don't understand this confusion. It's like they were scared to say what it was. They were afraid to say that something horrible was going down at their school because they were afraid that if they were wrong, their school would have appeared unsafe for no reason. And God forbid a Broward County school look like it had any problems, especially with safety. 1958 began climbing the east stairwell to the third floor. The third floor, unlike the empty second floor, was complete bedlam. On the west side of the hallway, Mr. Rospersky told his students to go back into their classrooms, thinking at that point that it was a drill. On the east side of the hallway, Miss Lapel urged her students toward the stairwell, following the protocol for a fire drill. Mr. Beagle's classroom was closest to the stairwell, and after hearing the gunshots, he began yelling for the students to run. He directed his students back into his classroom, and then he stood in his doorway trying to quickly lock his door. Now, the classroom doors in building 12 only locked from the outside, so he had to actually go outside, reach around with his keys and lock that door from that side and then pull the door shut. A student recalled Scott Beagle didn't scream or anything, he just fell. And he fell in the doorway. The door was basically being propped open at that point by Scott Beagle's body. Scott Beagle, 35. At this point, there were about 20 students still out in the hallway. 1958 began firing again, hitting the final 5 students. Jamie Guttenberg, 14. Cara Loughran, 14. Joaquin Oliver, 17. Meadow Pollock, 18. And Peter Wang, 15. Mr. Raspersky testified, and while he was on the witness stand, the people in the chat were making fun of him. They were saying all sorts of things. I was gonna make a video just talking about how disrespectful people in the chat on Law and Crime Network are during a live trial, but I scrapped it because it was just me being very angry with people, and I just had to say, forget it, we're not gonna do this. It's disrespectful for me to make a video talking about how disrespectful they are. Really, it was something I needed to just let go of. I've become very involved and wrapped into this case and very sensitive to the witnesses and the victims, and because I have done nothing but look into their lives, even so much as to reading the Eagle Eye, their school newspaper, and all the accounts of how they felt. I've watched videos of them on YouTube right after it happened, talking about their experience and watching this, and I feel very protective of them, even though I really don't. I have no right to. I do, though. I do feel that way. So anyway, I was getting really pissed to the point where I cannot watch the trial now unless I hide the chat. All right, I'm sorry. Mr. Raspersky, he used his body to barricade as many students from the shooter as he could, pulling them first into an alcove where he was face to face with 1958, who was wearing a gas mask. Raspersky, after being grazed by 2 bullets, one in the face and one in the hip, rushed students into the stairwell, where he then proceeded to hold the stairwell door closed with his foot on the bottom of the door and his hands on the handle of the door. 1958 made several attempts to get in, but finally he gave up when he couldn't gain entry. He instead turned and went into the teacher's lounge. Ernest Raspersky, or Ernie, prevented 1958 from pursuing students. He saved lives. Raspersky risked his life to give students more time to flee. Aaron Feiss and Chris Hickson gave their lives in unarmed attempts to take down the shooter. They are heroes. There is no greater contrast to those three men and Deputy Peterson, who drew his gun and hid outside in a neighboring building for nearly an hour, nor the Broward Sheriff's deputies, who had now just arrived on scene. All 17 victims were shot at this point, and the police are just now arriving. Inside the teacher's lounge, 1958 had reached his final destination. His initial goal was to shoot at all of the students from the teacher's lounge windows as they ran from the building. Thanks to Assistant Principal Porter and his evacuation order, all students who had followed that order and weren't either dead or barricaded in a classroom were open target. By the grace of God, 1958's bullets were not strong enough to shatter the hurricane-proof glass in the teacher's lounge. Broward deputies Perry, Goolsby, Miller, Seward, and Stambaugh arrived on scene 100 yards north of Building 12. Hearing the gunshots, Deputy Stambaugh realized that he wasn't wearing his bulletproof vest. So he went back to his car and took 1 full minute to put his vest on. Shots were ringing out from Building 12. When he was done, he just stood there. Deputy Eason, remember him? The one who told the concerned mother that 1958's threat to shoot up the school was protected by the First Amendment? He took position on the road 300 yards west of Building 12. Sergeant Miller, the supervising officer on the scene, after hearing shots fired, put on his bulletproof vest and hid behind his car. It was his responsibility to direct the response of the officers on scene, but he did not get on his radio for 54 minutes. Deputies Kratz and Seward just stood by Miller, and Deputies Goolsby and Perry began to approach, but then took cover behind trees as 1958 fired off his final shots in his final effort to break the hurricane-proof glass. 1958 took 17 lives that day, but it could have easily been 170 or more. He had 10 minutes alone with 800 students, and the only one who stopped him was himself. He dropped his rifle and left the building, blending in with fleeing students. A girl testified to talking with him as they were leaving. They were all in a line together, and I guess she recognized him from Westglades Middle School, and she asked him how he was doing and if he had any college plans.
And I turned around and, I hadn't seen him in years. I spent the first 2 years at another school, so my last 2 years were at Stoneman Douglas. Looking back, obviously had no idea. I realized he was standing with another friend of mine. When I realized that, we kind of collided in the line, so we became one line. When we became one line, I said hi, he said hi back, and I said, you have any college plans? And he said, somewhere in Florida. At that time, we got filed into one line. He was right behind me. And at that time, I was still trying to find friends of mine. I was on the phone with my mom.
It's very emotional to see her kind of just in shock because he was talking to her like nothing. Like, what? From a position where he could have seen 1958 walk out of the building, Deputy Peterson was radioing police to stay away from the 12 and 1300 buildings, saying, "Do not approach." Police radioed a repeat of that message, basically telling each other, don't approach the 12 and 1300 buildings. Then why are you there? You are called for a school shooting. Don't approach the building where the shooting's going on, though. From behind his tree, Deputy Perry radioed that he had a parent tell him that there was a child down and to have fire rescue staged in the area until they make contact. When the hell is that going to be? Parents of the students at this point, because of all the 911 calls going on from students inside, know more about what's going on than the police do. When I covered the Uvalde shooting and I heard about parents having to go in and save their own children while police just stood there, I had no idea that was a common occurrence in school shootings. What I do know is that it's not legal protocol. It's not what they're taught for them to just stand there. But just like MSD made their own rules and policies, so did Broward County Sheriff's Department. The Broward County Sheriff's Office captain in charge, Jan Jordan, pulled up in her cruiser. She too could have seen 1958 walking away from Building 12. It was said that Captain Jan Jordan was not even qualified to be a captain, but she was a diversity hire. Being both female and homosexual was the reason that they had hired her, not for her skill in being a captain. Her police radio wasn't even working. Broward Sheriff's Office radios were notoriously faulty and failed to work properly in Parkland, even on a normal day. Sheriff Scott Israel, who once spent $12,500 to put his face on police cruisers around election time, prioritized so-called community outreach efforts over replacing the radio system. 8 Broward Sheriff Department deputies heard 1958's final shots. None went in to face the shooter. Remarkably, by declining to confront an individual who could have been murdering many more children as they stood outside, these deputies were actually operating in accordance with a policy change made by Sheriff Israel. Sheriff Israel changed Broward Sheriff's Office active shooter policy from saying shall enter a building to address a shooter to saying that they may. The use of the word may is not consistent with current and standard law practices. Broward Sheriff's deputies couldn't even recall the date or nature of their last active shooter training, which should have been annually, as it was for Coral Springs Police Department, who, once they arrived, started directly moving in on Building 12. They, along with a few Broward Sheriff's Office deputies, Hanks and Volpe, ran into Building 12 from the west side, 11 minutes after shots were first fired. And this is like deja vu with Uvalde for me, even though obviously Parkland happened first. The last members of law enforcement to arrive were the ones who actually did something. Now, they immediately saw Chris Hickson, who was not yet dead, and they tried to get him medical attention. They began searching and clearing the building. Captain Jan Jordan was still radioing for a perimeter to be set up and to shut down the school. She was then informed that teams had already entered Building 12 without her order. Thank goodness they did. Before Coral Springs Police Department entered Building 12, they found Deputy Peterson in his hiding spot, and they asked him for a situation report. Now, keep in mind, 1958 is gone. He has already left the building, literally. I'll just sum it up for you, the situation report. Basically, he had no fucking idea. No clue at all what was going on. He said the shooter might be in the parking lot behind them and to watch their 6. 4 minutes after that, he told Police Officer Best that the shooter was on the 2nd or 3rd floor of Building 12. More and more officers began running into the building. Deputy Peterson, after 55 minutes, finally moves from his hiding spot, farther away from Building 12. Going into the final mistakes. Many school districts allow local law enforcement to have access to real-time security footage, not the Broward County Public Schools. Are you shocked at this point? You shouldn't be. This policy set the stage for deadly errors. 3 minutes after 1958 left the building, Kelvin Greenleaf and Jeff Morford entered the security video room. They began describing what they were seeing on the tapes to Winfred Porter and Scott Peterson, forgetting or not making it clear that this was delayed footage. It was a recording. The footage was delayed 26 minutes. At 2:50 p.m., they have 1958 going from the second floor to the third floor and back to the second floor again. Broward Sheriff's Office Deputy Rossman asked if this was live intel. Porter replied, "This is live." Rossman asked again, "Well, where was he last seen? This is live? Like right now, this is live?" And Porter confirmed, "This is live." 1958 had left the building at 2:28 p.m. 22 minutes before, they were monitoring him live in the building. At 2:57 p.m., Porter informed Rossman that they were, in fact, looking at recorded feeds. Rossman then waited an additional 4 minutes to relay that message. At 3 p.m., Jeff Morford announced that 1958 had run out of the building. At 3:01 p.m., a group of police reached the third floor of Building 12. 36 minutes after students were shot there. Officers are beginning to triage the wounded and dying. Coral Springs Deputy Michael McNally repeatedly asked Captain Jordan for medics to be sent in the building. Jordan repeatedly said no. Even after it was confirmed that the shooter had left the building on the 26-minute delayed footage, she still denied medics from going into Building 12. It certainly is possible that those crucial minutes that Jordan denied medical attention to victims that were bleeding out cost lives. A little over an hour after 1958 left Building 12, he was arrested by Coconut Creek police officer Leonard.
What's going on? What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
Yeah, no problem.
Voices.
Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? What the f***? Where the f*** am I? Holy sh**. What happened?
Shut up.
Just be quiet, man.
Shut up.
What the fuck you do, dude?
He had already had a slushie from Subway.
He wanted an icy mixed. It was a cherry and a blue raspberry.
And a little chat with one of his victims' brothers at McDonald's. So there you have it. Who 1958 was always. The programs, the policies, and the people that could have prevented this shooting. In my opinion, They helped form this severely mentally disturbed kid into a killer by his 18th birthday, all due to pure negligence, ignorance, and politics. Not one of the Promise Program staff members followed up on him when he didn't show up. Not one reform policy helped keep him from prison. Not one person who had the proper authority to institutionalized him. Not one law enforcement officer who had cause to arrest him for felony behavior arrested him. Not one school administrator kept MSD safe from a kid that displayed violent tendencies and even posted about shooting up their school and killing teachers and students regularly. What's worse, they allowed his enrollment in JROTC and taught him how to use an air rifle replica AR-15. Not one teacher, student, staff, or parent that warned administrators about the danger of Nikolas Cruz was ever taken seriously. Not one SRO, school resource officer, who had the opportunity to call a code red before 1958 even entered the freshman 1200 building that held 800 children inside, called a code red. Not one armed SRO or Broward County Sheriff's Office deputy confronted him. Only one person stopped 1958. Himself. So should he get the death penalty? Does he deserve it? Is he the sole person to blame? Is he the sole person to hold accountable for those 17 lives lost and all the traumatic events that will haunt the other students, staff, faculty, and families for the rest of their lives? I believe in order for him to deserve the death penalty, you have to answer yes to that last question in order to say yes to the first two. If your answer is yes, he should, and yes, he does, I hope that you also realize that you are saying that every one of those people that did nothing to stop him for over 17 years, up until the very second that he walked into that building and opened fire, despite all the red flags, violence, threats, calls, written statements, played no role in creating the Parkland Massacre. In my opinion, Broward County groomed and fed a mentally disturbed child into being nothing but a mentally disturbed adult. They took care of him until his 18th birthday, and all the money was paid up for schooling him, and then they just let him go. In my opinion, they knew he was capable of being a monster long before the shooting. They helped create him into one.
Hello, my name is Nick, and I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018. My goal is at least 20 people with an AR-15 and a couple tracer rounds. I think I can get done. Location is Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, Florida. It's going to be a big event. And when you see me on the news, you'll all know who I am. You're all going to die. Pew, 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 pew. Yeah. Can't wait. Today is the day that it all begins. The day of my massacre shall begin. All the kids in school will run in fear and hide. From the wrath of my power, they will know who I am. I am nothing, I am no one. My life is nothing and meaningless. Everything that I hold dear, I let go beyond your half. Every day, I see the world ending another day. I live a lone life, live in seclusion and solitude. I hate everyone and everything. With the power of my AR, you will all know who I am. I had enough of being told what to do and when to do. I had enough of being telling me that I'm an idiot and a dumb. But in real life, you're all the dumb. You're all stupid and brainwashed by these political government programs. You will all see, you will all know who my name is. My love for you, Angie, will never go away. I hope to see you in the afterlife. When one day or another, you will end and we'll all die. Alright, so here's the plan. I'm gonna go take an Uber in the afternoon before 2:40. From there, I'll go onto school campus, walk up the stairs, unload my bags, and get my AR and shoot people down at the main courtyard. I'll wait, and people will die.